Hello, and thank you everybody for another special edition of the LymeBoss podcast. I'm Heather Gray, aka the LymeBoss, and I work with frustrated professionals who are over their brain fog, can't figure out their embarrassing gut issues, and are tired of their chronic widespread pain. Is that you? Could it be undiagnosed Lyme disease? I know it was for myself. Today, we've got special guest, Dr. Christina Bjorndal. And she's going to be talking about mental health, which is one of my all-time favorite topics to talk about on here, because I think with the shape of the world these days, right, and just the still stigma that it goes with mental health issues, that's why it's still so near and dear to my heart. Many of you know my story of 28 years of undiagnosed Lyme disease. And multiple other autoimmune stuff. And, I was labeled crazy. I was in the psych ward twice. And once you get smacked with that label, it's really, really hard to unravel from that label, right? I've even had a functional practice that I was working with actually fire me for talking about mental health stuff on social media. So this topic really fires me up, and the more awareness that we can bring to this, the better. So thank you, Dr. Chris, for everything that you're doing. So tell us a little bit about yourself. Like, how did you get into this line of work? What lights you up about it?
Yeah. So I haven't always been a naturopathic doctor, and it really was my journey to regaining my own mental health that led me to eventually make that career change and become one. And the things that I was diagnosed with include depression, anxiety. I've had 3 suicide attempts, and the very first depression that I experienced, I ended up going on antidepressants, and I flung into a psychotic event. Had this really scary for me, because I didn't know what was happening to me. And it took 6 people to wrestle me into a straitjacket, and off I went to the hospital, where I was left in a rubber room to come back to reality. And then when I did, they said, well, now you've got bipolar disorder type 1. And I was having nothing to do with that. I did not know. First of all, I didn't even know what depression was. I only understood it in the economic sense of the word. And then this new diagnosis seemed a bit like it didn't really fit, even though I had that experience, but I was on medication. So I'm like, well, how do you know that it wasn't that? Right. So I just marched through the world then thinking that basically having nothing to do with this diagnosis. It wasn't happening to me. Thank you very much. But when I graduated, I continued my overachieving tendencies, and eventually I reported to a CEO. And it was during that time that I did have the suicide attempt. And that really is kind of my turning point. I refer to it as a spiritual crisis, because I, by all intents and purposes, really shouldn't have survived, but I did. And so I had to then reconcile that and figure out, okay, how am I going to navigate my health? Because the way that I'm doing it, taking psychotropic med upon psychotropic med, isn't actually leading me to health. I'm actually getting sicker. So my friend gave me a book to read by Marianne Williamson called A Return to Love. And
I love that book.
Yeah. And there's this quote on surrender that I found really impactful, that basically surrender is not about breaking out of anything, but it's a gentle melting into who you really are. So you take down your armor. And for my case, I was wearing a mask most of the time, and basically discover that all God needs is just one sincere surrendered moment where love matters more than anything and nothing else matters at all. And that, for me, the key word in that phrase was love. So I wasn't walking through the world loving who I was. And that's really been the journey for the last 35 years, is how do I turn towards love and compassion for myself and away from these demons, if you will, that are driving me, these thoughts, these beliefs, this inner critic that is beating me up every step of the way. And that then eventually led me to see a naturopathic doctor. And then I got better. And I was like, well, there's got to be something to this. And so then I made a career change, and here I am.
That's incredible. It's funny, not funny, but when I was in the psych ward for my suicide attempt, I watched them wrestle a woman to the ground to put a straitjacket on her. I wonder if we were in around the same time. Seems to be kind of the commonplace, but I made a video not too long ago called "Put the Bat Down," right? About, not beating yourself up with these inner critics. And I think a lot of us type A personality types are kind of driven by that taskmaster, that whipping, so I can totally relate with that. Thank you for being so vulnerable and sharing as well. Like, there was something I was going to ask there. Love matters. I'll come back to it, but yes, thank you for that. So then how long have you been practicing, and what was it about the naturopathic way that helped you get over the mental health stuff, get off the prescriptions and lead a better life?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, I mean, what I explain when I'm working with patients now is that there's basically 4 aspects to us as people: the physical, the mental, the emotional, and the spiritual. And I do think that all 4 areas have to be looked at and addressed.
Wait. Say that again. All 4 areas? A little louder.
Physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual.
Amen. So many people, especially in the functional health world, they focus on the physical only. And even with my Lyme clients, I tell them all the time, you can't just focus on treatment. You've got to look at the whole picture. So thank you. Sorry. Just really wanted to hit that home.
Yeah. No, you're right. I mean, it's so many of us. And so lately I've just been drawing that out, like, with a circle, right? That circle represents you as a person. And then we've got those 4 slices of the pie. But the one slice that functional meds and Western med docs are focusing on is the physical slice only. And with that, we want to understand that there's 3 pieces to that pie. You've got your neurotransmitters, your hormones, and your organs of detoxification, and then your immune system. So for me, what helped was I was like that too, right? I started with a nutritionally oriented psychiatrist and a naturopathic doctor, and the nutritionally oriented psychiatrist was really just focused on supplementation to support the neurotransmitter pathways. And that worked. Like, I got better from an anxiety and a depression perspective. I also had an eating disorder, which I didn't mention at the beginning. And so there were a lot of cracks in my nutritional foundation. So just, fixing those cracks was helpful with the supplements. But I just want to mention here that it's important to understand that if you still have to address the nutrition. You can't, outrun a crappy diet, right? And I had a crappy diet. So, I say I was a vegetarian, but there was hardly any vegetables in my vegetarian diet. Like, I was a total carbitarian, and it was just like, I lived in my apartment for 7 years and I never used my oven. Like, it was like very bad in that department. So I understand when people come to me and they're like, I don't know how to cook. And I said, I get it. Listen, I get it. Like, but you can learn.
Absolutely. That's one of my free gifts on my website, is a cooking video series showing you real cooking for real life, how to make these beautiful meals in 20 minutes or less. Like, it's a learning curve like anything else, but is absolutely necessary. So what did you use your oven for? Did you store your sweaters in it?
I don't even know what I used it for. I didn't even maximize that real estate.
Wow. I spend so much time in the kitchen. That just blows my brain.
I know, it's terrible. And that was in the 20s, when I was in my mid 20s. Right. So, and a lot of 20 people, sort of 18 to 35, like, I think, as parents, we really are doing our children a disservice if we're not teaching them how to cook.
100%.
And, 100%. In all fairness to my parents, they tried, but I was just more interested in studying, achieving, running faster, jumping higher. I wasn't interested in the cooking, and they were doing it for me. So, you know what I mean? So, didn't really serve me that well in the long run, I guess, but eventually I figured it all out. So, and I think that's the important message, is that you have to start where it's possible for you and make a change in a direction that's supportive of health, and your body will respond. And so that's really what naturopathic medicine did for me, was that I started to feel better. And that's the key. Any treatment ultimately is you want the person to feel better. But then I ended up bumping up against my thoughts and my emotions and this spiritual side. So I had to take a look at those pieces of the puzzle too.
Absolutely. Beautiful. So just really weird. I know it's on a tangent, but I've been noticing some long O's. Where are you from?
Oh, Canada.
Oh, nice. That's awesome. How long have you been in Canada?
Well, my whole life, I guess. I mean, I'm adopted. So, but yeah, my whole life.
Gotcha. Oh, that's a whole nother can of worms to open up, as far as like past trauma and right, like abandonment issues, like that's a whole nother, in the bioenergetic work that I was funny, like one of the very first scans that I ran on somebody and abandonment came up and she just immediately started bawling and she's like, I was adopted and I've been dealing with abandonment issues my whole life. I was like, whoa, stuff that, folks that if you're not going through it, that you don't really realize, right, what the other party is going through. And so, there's a lot of different stuff there to unravel. So take us down a little deeper into looking at the whole the whole circle of it for a person, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So then the way, basically I talk about in my book, Beyond the Label, that there's 10 steps essentially. So the first one is nutrition. Then we want to make sure sleep is ultimately as good as it can be. And then the movement piece, exercise. Our bodies are meant to move, right? We're not meant to sit here for 8 hours a day in front of a screen. So move your body. Then stress management. So those for the 4 sort of foundational pillars. But then with respect to stress management, we want to take a look at how your thoughts, your core beliefs, limiting beliefs, shadow beliefs, unconscious commitments, how you behave and react in the world, your ability or inability as a recovering people pleaser to set boundaries. Then we want to understand the role the environment can play from 3 perspectives, right? Quality of the air, food, and water. Like I said a minute ago, any treatment that you start, the goal is generally you should feel something, right? And if you're not feeling better, then maybe it's not the right macro system is one sign. But the other thing is maybe it's not a deficiency problem, like you don't have a deficiency of a neurotransmitter or a hormone, but maybe there's something from the environment, a chemical blocking the receptor like a bouncer, so you can't get in, right?
Not like a bouncer. I like that. That's a great analogy.
Yeah, and you really got to clean up. The environment is a big, huge piece of this puzzle. So that, and then the environment from the second perspective is what you were mentioning in a sense, which is this intergenerational trauma idea of epigenetics. So a lot of people think genes load the gun, but really lifestyle pulls that trigger, right? And the interesting thing with me, when I got diagnosed with bipolar disorder, I was like, well, so I said, well, how do I get, like, how do I get this? How did I get it? How do I get rid of it? Basically. Right. And he just says to me, well, it's genetic. And I said, well, I can't verify the truth of that. Like, I can't look to my left or my right to verify that. So how is that true then? Like, if that's all you got for me, I don't know that I'm going to buy into that. That's it. Right. And this is the epigenetics piece too, because it's not necessarily, genes aren't your destiny.
Absolutely. Amen. I say that all the time as well. This is a really beautiful spot to pause really quick. We want to go into a little word from our sponsor, but hold on tight. We'll be right back. Hey there, Heather Gray, the LymeBoss, and are you ready to take charge of your mental health today? Enrollment is open for Moving Beyond Coaching, the 10-week program to improve your mental health naturally. The truth is, you're meant to be happy. Your life matters. Your happiness matters. Moving Beyond Coaching is different because you get more than just information. This program is intended to transform you, and it does. Get support from Dr. Chris herself and the most compassionate group of peers in the private Moving Beyond community. Cutting-edge science, naturopathic wisdom, compassionate guidance, and a lifetime access to the program material. If you're ready for better days and a new outlook on life, and it would be Dr. Chris's pleasure to be your guide. Moving Beyond Coaching is like any other program you've ever seen. Enrollment is only open till April 2nd, and this is the only time it's going to run this year. So if you're on the fence, get off the fence and enroll today. You'll get the most current scientific information, clarity, and gentleness you need to put you back in charge of your life. Learn more about Beyond Coaching at the link in the show notes. Thanks and stay tuned. Awesome. Welcome back. So we were just done talking about, boy, Dr. Chris, you're bringing in all my favorite stuff. So a lot of the DNA and the epigenetics, because it pisses me off so much when people are like, it's just in my genes. It's like, you don't understand how much your lifestyle and you talk, thank you for bringing in like the toxin piece. And, if you've got an environment, mold has been huge with a lot of the folks that I work with, like a lot of like treatment resistant type stuff. then start looking into mold, and it's amazing how much of a huge percentage people are living in. I think the statistics are like 50% of buildings have been water damaged, and if you do have a genetic mutation going on, that's going to make you more susceptible to these things, absolutely. That's going to just be another direction of why things aren't working for you. Right. So, but it's not the be all end all. Genetics, just because it's showing up in your genes, doesn't mean that it's the nail in the coffin, right? So thank you for bringing in the epigenetic piece.
Yeah.
So talk a little more on that, if you would.
Yeah. Well, basically, the next area under the environment, the third piece really is this idea of neuroplasticity as well, right? So a lot of people, again, think that they're broken, think that they can't be fixed. And you have to understand that your brain is not a big lump of cement. Like, it actually is more like a pile of Play-Doh, and it has bendy quality to it. And so you can create new neural pathways. There's a good book called The Brain That Changes Itself by Norman Doidge. So he looked at lots of neurological conditions that technically people sort of cast to the darkness and say, there's nothing we can do. And he's had lots of success changing things. So mental health in particular, I think, is a really great neuroplastic opportunity to create new pathways in your brain. So that's the last sort of piece under the environment. And then ultimately wrapping everything up in compassion and spirituality and love for yourself. Because at the end of the day, I really think that it is ultimately how you feel about yourself that is going to navigate and dictate and determine the steps you take towards health.
Absolutely. Another amen. When I first met my husband 5 years ago, I remember I would talk poorly about myself, and he would go, "Stop talking about my wife like that." And it kind of, nobody's ever corrected me before, including myself. And so it kind of made me take a step back and go, crap, I am talking to myself poorly. And it's funny now how I can pick it up so much now when other people talk like that. And it makes me cringe, because it makes my heart hurt, because I know where that comes from. Right. And I know what that kind of self-talk keeps people sick. Like, I know there's this big range of, toxic positivity, and that's not what we're saying, right? It's just a piece to that whole puzzle, right? But it is a piece, and it is one that absolutely needs to be looked at. If you're not minding what's the thoughts, a lot of it'll undo a lot of the other stuff that you're doing. So that's a beautiful, I'm so just, like I said, I'm just so tickled by everything that you're talking about right now. Like, it makes my heart happy that there's a doctor out there doing this stuff. So yay.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I just say too, like, listen, I used to be like, if you had said to me, "Oh, hey, Chris, change your thoughts, change your life," I would have been like, forget it. Like, that baloney, that doesn't
piss
work.
off, you dirty hippie.
But the reality is, I didn't know about Candace Pert's work and Bruce Lipton's work and this idea of psychoneuroimmunology, which is just a big fancy word that means your thoughts affect your physiology. So all that means for people, just so that you get it, is that your thoughts actually create neuropeptides, so little chemical messengers that communicate with the different glands in your body that produce hormones. And then those hormones determine how you feel. And they push you, and you only have really two states: sympathetic or stressed, parasympathetic or relaxed. And so you want to be mindful of, okay, what's the nature of the thoughts that I'm thinking, right? Are they serving me or sabotaging me, hurting me or helping me? Inner critic, inner cheerleader. What side of the street are they on, if you will? And if you're on that sympathetic side, as I was pretty much 100% of the time, it's a matter of learning how to bring awareness and then move over to the other side of the street. I mean, again, it's like a pendulum, right? We're going to move maybe into sympathetic when you got a deadline or you're, feeling pressed for whatever. But the idea is to move and spend most of your time in that parasympathetic state. And the reason, and this is one of my big pet peeves about the health industry, is they're all focused on the food that you eat and the testing to do and the supplements to take. And don't get me wrong, that's all fine. However, if you're not in a parasympathetic state when you're eating the food, then what's the point, really?
Amen. That's why I started doing a lot of the trauma work myself this past 2 years, because I kept relapsing, right? Little Miss Functional Practitioner. I was doing all the things, but I kept relapsing because I never worked on my hidden trauma. I never worked on my nervous system. There's a tiger always in the freaking room. And when it's always in the room, you can't digest, you don't heal. Your body's not worried about that. It's worried about getting rid of the tiger. And the whole, you were talking about the peptides that are made from your thoughts, like Louise Hay from, Hay House. She put it so eloquently one time, cracked my shit up how easily it was. But she's like, think about something sexy, right? Think about like a pornographic image. Tell me that your physical body does not react to that thought that you're having. Like, that was one of the simplest things that I can think of. I was like, oh my gosh, absolutely. There's a direct correlation, right, of that. And so why wouldn't that work for other things, not just something that turns us on, right? So beautiful. Absolutely. 100%. Thank you. And what are some of the tools that you like to work with when you're working with somebody trying to get them out of fight or flight?
So the main one for me is this grounding practice. Essentially, I call it the 4 R's. So it's basically and kind of similar. It's similar in a sense to Tara Brach's work with her. She has a RAIN practice, her acronym. Anyway, I don't know I can't remember what that stands for, but mine is basically, first we're going to recognize the thoughts, right? Like, what side is it on the street? And if it's on the side that's pulling you into a downward spiral, then let's refrain as a second one from following it by relaxing into the breath. And then I teach people this connection with their body and their lungs and their diaphragm and their adrenal glands, and how to basically, like, we're physiologically designed to calm ourselves down, but we're not actually just taking the time to do that with the breathing. So connecting with the body and often getting out of the mind, right? Because everybody's living here from the neck up, right? And we're discounting the body. So that's one of the most important things for me is teaching people to get in the gap, if you will. Like Wayne Dyer used to talk about the gap, right? Between each thought, there is a space. And so we just have to increase that space between the rapid fire thoughts that come and move into this power of pausing. So that's a lot of it. And the other piece is also just helping people see where they're living in their mind, right? There's 3 places, and often people aren't in the present moment. They're either in the past or the future. Past in a state of regret or anger or frustration, disappointment, or in the future with anxiety, fortune telling, catastrophizing, what if thinking. We want to stay in the present moment, right? And affirm outcomes for yourself, but focus on what you want.
Absolutely.
Right? And then that gets into kind of this idea of Joe Dispenza's work and quantum physics, and just setting that intention about what it is that you want to have happen for yourself. And then the past stuff, right? That's the trauma bucket. We have to look at that. And because there's limiting beliefs and shadow beliefs and unconscious commitments that come from that trauma, right? So, and we all have a certain, I think collectively, having gone through the pandemic, we all have experienced some form of trauma in some way, shape, or form. So it's a big piece of the puzzle too. Huge.
Absolutely. So thank you for that. Do you work remotely with folks, or how does that work?
I do. I have a full one-on-one practice, but I have a group program that I'm starting. And so that'll be coming up April 3rd. So that's how I'm able to address people or help people remotely.
Very cool. Very cool.
Yeah.
Awesome sauce. And then how can they get a hold of you? Where can they find you, Dr. Chris?
Yeah, I'm on those regular social channels, right? Like, well, actually, I'm not on all of them because I can't handle it. So I'm on Instagram.
It's a lot, right?
As soon as a new one comes out, I'm like, I'm out. I am out.
No more.
I'm old enough to have been there since the beginning. So Facebook and Instagram, just my name, and then my website, which is my name, which is long. I won't spell it for you because you'll probably.
It'll be in the show notes. Yeah. We'll find you. Awesome. Well, I can't thank you enough for taking some time out today. Cause like I said, you are just you are preaching to the choir, sister. You are speaking my language, and I just love what you dropped. I tell people all the time too, if you go see a functional practitioner or an acupuncturist or any other alternative person and all they're doing is supplements, run, because it's going to be a really expensive P that you're paying for if you're not putting in these other areas. So please look at the whole body, look at the whole system, not just one piece, and reach out to folks like Dr. Chris here, who's doing amazing work around this. So I bless you. I thank you for being on the show with us today, and everybody, make sure to have a healthy day.